Chapter 6, Section 2, Toward Religious Toleration. We will learn how the expansion of religious liberty after the American Revolution reflected the new American ideal of freedom. Remember that religious toleration wasn't still widespread in the colonies. Remember that in the previous chapter we talked about the Quebec Act. The British Parliament passed an act that recognized freedom of religion for the French Catholics that were in the newly acquired Canadian colonies, and that upset Protestants in the colonies, afraid of Catholicism spreading to the colonies. Here you see an interesting image of New York City in 1771, and it shows the different kinds of churches, denominations that you found in New York City. These are some of the most numerous churches that were visible from the New Jersey shore, and it shows the diversity of religions that were practiced in New York City alone. But of course, New York was a very cosmopolitan city. Catholic Americans. The Revolution also expanded religious freedoms, although a few colonies, such as Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, tolerated different religious groups and sects, sects, before the Revolution. Freedom to worship elsewhere flowed from the reality of religious pluralism. Before the Revolution, most colonies supported religious institutions with public funds and discriminated in office holding against Catholic Jews and even dissenting Protestants. The deep anti-Catholicism of colonial America was weakened by the Revolution. In approving a plan to invade Canada, the Second Continental Congress invited the Catholic inhabitants of Quebec to join Protestant American revolutionaries. Once the Congress formed an alliance with the Catholic nation of France in 1778, and after France proved essential to American victory, Catholics were seen as having a role in the new nation. So it took France helping us win our independence, and they really did. We could not have probably done it without them. Catholics were now going to be seen with much more respect. And so even up until quite possibly today, you've only seen one Catholic president in the history of the United States. And there's always been this belief, as you can see from that political cartoon, that Catholics, their first allegiance would be to the Pope and not to the country. And so there you see an image that kind of reflects that. You have a Pope here on the phone, and he's got direct lines to the Republicans and to the Democrats. So that somehow religion would play a role in the government. But again, to many in the Christian right, religion plays a role anyway. Something we'll continue to discuss. The founders and religion. The end of British rule led many to challenge the privileges of the established Anglican Church in several colonies. Revolutionary leaders like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton wanted to avoid the kind of religious-driven political conflict that had engulfed Europe for centuries. While viewing religion as a necessary basis for public morality, they were also skeptics and rationalists, steeped in Enlightenment philosophy, and believed in a benevolent creator, but not in divine intervention in human affairs. A lot of our founding fathers were what we call deists, D-I-E-S-T-S. Deists believe that there is a God, but he's not a God that's involved in our everyday lives. He's kind of what they call the big clockmaker. You build a clock and you just let it run. You let it tell time. And so God created the earth, and he's kind of just sitting back and watching it. He's kind of letting us do our own thing, letting us learn on our own. And so our founding fathers, their predecessors left Europe because of religious conflict, and they did not want that to happen in the newly formed America. So they purposefully did not build our country around religion. God is mentioned only once in our Constitution, and that is to say in the year of our Lord, 1789, and that is it. If our founding fathers wanted religion to be mixed with our government, they would have done it. But they firmly believed in the separation of church and state. So it's very, very important for us to recognize that. No one is saying that you should not practice your faith. Everyone has a right to worship or not worship as they see fit. However, no government shall infringe any kind of religion on anyone else, and religion just should play no part in our government. Separating church and state. The push to separate church and state united deists like Thomas Jefferson and evangelical Protestants who sought to protect religion from the corruptions of government. Throughout the United States, states deprived the established churches of their public funding and special legal privileges, and several state constitutions guaranteed the free exercise of religion. Yet religious toleration was far from universal. Every state except New York retained laws barring Jews from voting and holding office, and 7 states limited office holding to Protestants in their governments. Massachusetts retained its congregational establishment well into the 19th century. Catholics, however, gained the right to worship freely throughout the former colonies. So it wasn't 100% separation from church and state. That would take time. But there were steps being taken to move the country in that way. So one of the things that Thomas Jefferson was most proud of was this, a bill establishing religious freedom in Virginia. He was very proud of having written this bill. Thomas Jefferson even wrote his own version of the Bible. And he took out all the kind of supernatural stuff from the Bible and focused really on the message of the Bible. So that would make for an interesting read. Jefferson and religious liberty. Thomas Jefferson was an important figure in the advancement of religious liberty. In 1779, he wrote a bill for establishing religious freedom for the Virginia legislature. It was adopted in 1786, only after much controversy. Jefferson saw established churches as tyrannies that constrained free thought, and the bill eliminated religious requirements for voting and office holding and government financial support for churches. Religious liberty became the model for revolutionary generation's definition of rights as private matters to be protected from the government. In a very Christian but not very pious United States, the separation of church and state drew a line between public authority and a private sphere in which rights existed as a limitation on government power. The Revolution and the churches. While the Revolution expanded religious freedom, its emphasis on individual rights also challenged religious institutions and authority. In some churches, such as the Moravians who migrated to America from Germany, younger members of the community insisted that they had the liberty to conduct their own affairs, including arranging their own marriages. Yet by allowing for the growth of differentiation in denominations, the separation of church and state actually expanded religion's influence in American society. Anglicans, Presbyterians, and Congregationalists faced growing dissent from new groups such as the Baptists and the Universalists. And Christian republicanism. Colonial leaders were not hostile to religion. Separation of church and state was not designed as an attack on religiosity itself. Instead, religious and secular language merged during the struggle for independence, thus creating an outlook some scholars have called Christian republicanism. Most leaders of the American Revolution were devout Christians, and even deists who did not attend an organized church believed that religious values reinforced the morality required for a private republic to thrive. Some states continued to bar non-Christians from political office and persecute people for blasphemy or violating the Sabbath. Revolutionary leaders worried about the charter of citizens, especially their virtue, their ability to sacrifice self-interest for the public good. Some promoted free public schools as a way to prepare citizens for a life of civic participation in government that was ultimately required of a free people. And that concludes section 2. If you have any questions about this section towards religious toleration, which can prove a little confusing, please reach out to me as you read the section. Thanks.